Swordid is an original webtoon created by Momo Gigi, a creator I talk about a lot on my live streams, go check them out, and generally one of my favorite creators in the industry right now. Unlike a lot of her work that covers things like relationship trauma and drama, and I can't forget the tried and true classic, relationship trauma and drama with dragons. Swordid opts to focus on the more controversial storytelling plot of incel versus Chad, a true dynamic of the ages. Our story follows Cato, recently awakened Chad, who spends the majority of the comic kicking ass, making friends, and taking names, only hampered slightly by their incel sword regularly asking Cato to kill people and listen to them while they're talking. Truly a virgin of a sword. Eventually, we lose the sword, and Cato meets our hunk of burning love, a true Sigma hero. Put a pin in that. Cato then spends the next few chapters going on adventurer dates with her new boyfriend and trying to find the beta cuck sword along the way. Their main goal is to help Hero find the cave of the story's big bad, Baal. At this point, we begin to realize that this was actually a fucking BL, hetero, gender fucky-wucky romance this whole time. Put a pin in that. This whole thing culminates in Cato getting his fucking head whacked like a piñata, and we do a flashback where we find out many more things that contextualize every aspect of the relationships you can see forming. And if you think you know what's coming up next, trust me, you fucking don't. Maybe you do. I don't know, I'm not your mom. So go read it. But if you're still not convinced, let me talk about my personal experience reading this story. Now, I am a fantasy lover to some extent. I grew up reading Tolkien and Percy Jackson as a regular book fan, and I've read a decent amount of fantasy webcomics over the past 20 years. These stories and comics are typically built off of established fantasy tropes with a strong focus on their lore and overall story direction. What I'm saying here is, in a lot of fantasy, it tends to matter more that things are happening than who did the thing. Lore is often more important than anything else. But what I've always enjoyed were what Hatsune Miku called faux fantasy. I assume there's a better name for it, but this is what I learned growing up. It's Discworld, essentially. The low magic, medium fantasy worlds where most of the time is spent focusing on character drama and internal conflicts and very little on the lore and backstory. I love this stuff like I love freebasing heroin on a Sunday morning outside an abandoned combination Pizza Hut and Taco Bell. I especially love it when combined with Momojiji's character writing that tends to centrally trend towards a theme. In this comic, I think the theme is self-acceptance, and the further I get along, the more I believe that. A consistent thing throughout the story is characters not being who others say they are. The sword waxes poetic about a wizard named Merkel, calling them the most powerful and best choice for our main character to become in reincarnation. The Bunnicorn, who was also Cato's sick Jays, was sold to be this unforgiving, deadly unicorn demon. Same for the Ram and his awful, terrible dad jokes. Put a pin in that. Also, remember our hero from earlier? He isn't exactly who he seems to be, and that is made painfully obvious after Cato gets their hands on the sword again. But whenever these characters are made to face their lie, suddenly, Cato's overwhelming self-acceptance seems to rub off on them, slowly making them into genuinely nicer people, allowing them to reflect and often become comfortable in who they are. The Bunnicorn accepts that he's just a little rabbit waiting for a pal, and the Ram accepts that he's a big scaredy cat who is acting out and is actually pretty heckin' rad when you get to know him. And Hero, well, you can find out about that in the comic. Narratively, this all comes to a head when the main antagonist of the story is confronted by this acceptance and honesty, where instead of looking inwards, they continually reject Cato. They instead try to run away, try to remove the source of this uneasiness they feel, as they would rather be inauthentically miserable and safe in their personal ideals than authentically happy and free of their mental chains. I don't know, this shit just sticks with me, and I think it would with you too. The writing in this comic in general sticks with me. Earlier I talked about the dad jokes the Ram tells. Well, I lied. Everyone tells dad jokes. It's been fun, she Putin. It's like living in a hell made of dads long since passed. The rest of the comedy though is very much situational. It's like watching Seinfeld or Abbott Elementary in a comic sometime. Momojiji has this sense of humor that I found to be incredibly cozy. And that desire to evoke a sense of comfort in their writing has definitely gotten a laugh out of me more than once. I appreciate a comic that understands it is pure goofiness in motion. Even more interesting is the way lore is inserted into this comic. While it may not seem like it, there is a lot to see, especially the deeper you go. Momojiji takes show don't tell to an extreme sometimes with this, and I appreciate keeping the baggage of the story somewhat visible, but not allowing it to burden the dialogue and the rest of the story. All of this brings a crisp simplicity to the comic. Despite all the praise, the art is its strongest component, which is saying a lot. The vibrant colors of this comic are goddamn everywhere. It's like being inside of a Michaels. Character design here is incredibly simple, largely because the character art isn't a major focus and sometimes feels like it's just there so we have a representative for the character in the story. This feels more true with Cato, a genderless, amorphous person who you've likely heard me refer to with multiple pronouns at this point, which means this comic counts as queer if you're fun and hetero if you're boring. See, remember the BL thing I mentioned earlier? Yeah, this is where the pin comes out. Anyway, that's all because Cato is a literal everyman, or should I say every person. They act as a foil for the audience's engagement and enjoyment, and while they do have a personality, they are as undetailed as possible, making it easier to transpose oneself onto them. Kind of like a neutral mask. Not a bad thing, but if you're in the market for highly detailed characters, of which every design element is a story element, then this ain't for you. Environments here are also simple, with the level of detail being all in service to the storytelling. That isn't to say there aren't some absolutely gorgeous environments, but this comic's visuals especially are very Hemingway-esque, and I don't know, it works really, really well. All this talk of simplicity in environments made me almost forget the action art, something that is definitely not a strong point of Momo Gigi's past work. In Swordid, however, she fucking kills it. While I can't show you the most impactful scenes for fear of spoiling too much, let's just say she cooks, and you should definitely experience the comic so you can savor this good soup. This comic is short, like 15 panels an episode, but it packs a ton in there. And unlike other webtoons, it fits a lot of story into a small package without being paced poorly. This is an atypical comic from Momo Gigi, so I recommend you read the others that they've made after you go read Swordid on Webtoon. Link in the pinned comment. Editor Nen here, just finishing up the edit, and I noticed that Momo Gigi was trying to win a Ringo Award for favorite hero. So if you go to ringoawards.com and nominate Cato for favorite hero, I'm sure they'd greatly appreciate that. Okay, that's it. Give me money on Patreon. Patreon.com/webcomics hub. My patrons get one extra vid every month and they get early access to all my stuff. Have a good day.